Be really good because then it takes some time to develop an opinion.
Or, I mean, I think that's the danger though, is you want to be able to like state what the issue is and give you some background. So you don't
Yeah.
Jump into conclusions like you're like, oh, I love this, and then it turns out, no, this is all wrong, or
Yeah.
I don't like this aspect, but that's not really what the issue related to the code is. So,
Yeah, that's true.
So we don't have a chair.
Yes, we do. It's you.
Yes. Realizing that.
It's 5:30. You got to start.
And I
Come on,
need,
buddy.
I need directions.
I got you.
Oh, I did see him in the, Mark just walked into the break room.
Oh,
Oh.
here he is.
There he is. All right. Saved.
All right. Maybe got stuck in traffic. It's kind of
ready to move over there?
congested out there.
Reluctantly.
Extremely
He
so.
had carpet
you gotta worry
installation
about it.
too. Couldn't find his tablet. Can do it on my phone.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Ski Hill Road, ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a mess out there.
Already had one.
Okay. I was thinking about two, but no.
Okay, it's 5:33. And like to call the Breckenridge Planning Commission of the 2nd of January in the new year of 2024 to order.
All right.
Can we get a roll call?
Mr. Gerard. Here. Mr. Frecker.
Present.
Mr. Giller. Mr. Lees.
Here.
Miss Proper.
Here.
Here.
Miss Gort.
Here.
Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, then we'll approve the minutes as they stand. Any changes to the agenda, staff?
No changes to the agenda tonight.
Okay. As part of a certified local government, we are asked to take public comment on historic preservation issues in the community. With that, I'll open up the meeting to any public comment. Doesn't look like we have any public here, so if there is anybody online, you need to press *9 on your phone, then *6, which will unmute you. Staff, anybody out there?
There is no one online, sir.
Okay, nobody loves us today. We have no consent calendar, I believe. So we move right into the work session, I would assume. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The cliff.
Good evening, commissioners. I hope you all had a lovely holiday and are welcome back for 2024. This evening, I am bringing a work session to you discussing window signage. There's definitely a lot of discussion possible, but we're going to try to focus on the stuff that was included within the packet. But definitely, if there are any questions relating to that information, we can kind of digress a little. So to begin, staff has basically been yielding or fielding quite a bit of questions from all business owners, from restaurateurs to retail to even some of the vendor carts, about window signage and other signage possibilities. Included in the packet, I was able to kind of include those links for you all to see the current regulations. So the two easiest that we always identify for almost all businesses are going to be window signage. Basically allows 4 individual signs for a total of 5 square feet. So cumulative of the 4, maximum 5 square feet. And then the other one is window wraps. So kind of looking in this example photo, and here I can bring up a little bit better one for you. Window wraps we see all around town. So they're going to be that 12-inch high kind of vinyl that is on the top or the bottom of windows all throughout. This is restaurateurs to retail, some of the vendor carts. All businesses are kind of pushed to utilize this, as this does not impact their overall sign area allotment that they get based on their building frontage. I guess I should back up a little bit. The windows signs, they automatically get 4 signs, 5 total square feet, regardless of what their operation is. So one of the things we wanted to bring up is a new format that we're seeing generally all around town in many different formats, but this is the back of house. So a really good example, and I'll talk while we're looking here at Lululemon, is being able to use these screenings to actually block out some of the operational, mechanical, or even just storage areas of all spaces. So for Lululemon, the white lettering is a proposal that we received recently from Lululemon's marketing team. It was declined. It was declined mostly because we currently have in our town code a maximum of 20 square feet being viewable from one single location. So if that is, right onto an elevation or from an opposite corner, maximum 20 square feet. Total, this was about 155 square feet of signage. So there's definitely reasons staff would decline that. But additionally, this did not meet the carve out that they're allowed in their master sign plan per the Main Street stations plan. So a really good example is basically the frosting behind this white lettering proposal that we have. It is existing, and currently that is actually blocking out all of the above that I mentioned. It is their storage, it is some of their mechanical space, as well as their dressing rooms. So obviously those are all areas that we kind of want to hide from the general public. So behind all the additional advertising, staff believes that this is a great example of utilizing kind of a whole window covering to kind of block out these more unsightly areas. So the next example is going to be Patagonia. This is on the Riverwalk side of their business. It is also more of a mechanical operational access. This is not something that's customer facing for you to leave and enter the store. This is just receiving deliveries. So a couple months ago, actually last summer sometime, Patagonia put up this installation. Staff has a few concerns of it overall, just about the amount of advertising on it. Even though, none of these actually say Patagonia, but it is kind of their ethos of kind of protecting the planet. The only panel that we'll discuss a little bit later is the second from the left. It does not include any advertising. So that's something that we'll get into here in a second. But overall, very good. We just don't like the message copy of it.
Cliff, do we have any say about the colors that are being used? The town weighs in on colors that people paint the buildings and everything else, but do they get a complete free pass? Because I think the most objectionable thing about that is just all the different colors.
So you are correct in the sense that we do review painting colors of residences, and other structures within town. But when it comes to signs, any like registered color trademark stuff, we're not allowed to review. We'll discuss it a little bit later. But overall, the overall things that we would look at is the size, height, orientation, location, setback, illumination, spacing, scale, and mass of the sign. We don't actually look at some of the copy or pictorial aspects of that sign when we review it. So to answer your question, no, we do not.
You don't review it because it's not in the code.
It's a Supreme Court ruling that we cannot review copy or content of signage, commercial signage, or
Any registered trademark colors.
First Amendment issue for, it's not a trademark, it's just we can't review any content, signage content.
What color would not fall in that? We're talking about text. We're not talking about text or trademark, logos, etc. We're not
Additionally-
talking about color.
So additionally, on top of what Sarah is saying, staff is not able to decline anything based on colors of their registered trademark. So if these are included in Patagonia's stuff,
What we're looking at up here is not Patagonia trademark with the exception of their top. So
I would argue
I ask-
against, I mean, definitely this sign up here has quite a bit of colors in it, and it is the registered trademark for
Well,
Patagonia.
I understand that.
Um,
But the one on the left,
I think that skyline is straight out of their logo.
it's,
It is. It is. It's exactly what it is.
so on top of what Sarah's saying, we're not allowed to decline anything based on their trademark. So no, we can't look at that based on color.
Oh,
They can use as much.
But overall, looking at Patagonia, most of the coverage aspect of it is kind of pictorial, graphic, color, etc. But then looking at some of the other message copy included within these vinyl signs, that's where staff's concerns are. So to jump over to Nextdoor, and this one I kind of called out in the staff report if you read it, but I thought this was a good kind of imagery to include. Patagonia is right next door. You can see here. This over here on the left is what this storefront looked like not too long ago. So as you can see, it's kind of their storage operational aspect. They've reached out to staff to kind of discuss some of this and look at what they could possibly do to just make it more of a sightly area. They then worked with staff. Worked with staff to come up with this rendering. They worked with us basically because the two signage on the left and right of this is limited to that 5 square feet of window signage that we discussed earlier. So technically this is completely code compliant. And then to show you that finished image, this is what it looks like today. So you're not able to see that stock operational room, the trash bags.
so they can have verbiage on there as long as it's a limited
Yes, ma'am.
square footage.
So in the previous aspect, staff has concerns with the amount of square footage for Patagonia. But then we've worked with this business owner to actually remain code compliant.
Isn't there a limit on how many signs you can have?
Yes.
So then that's 3.
So their permanent sign does not count within the carve out for window signs. So this counts for 2 of those possible 4,
Okay.
but
all
it
right, I got you,
maxes
I got
out
you.
the 5
Understood.
total square foot, the cumulative square footage. So they aren't technically allowed any more signs.
So when you're counting square footage, are you counting the voids between the letters?
So it is
So it's the
a
whole-
plain geometric shape. So I believe with this one, it would be a rectangle.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
5 square feet per storefront, not per window,
Per business.
per business.
So
Okay, got it.
both front and rear.
They have an entrance on Main Street. That counts as well.
Yes, sir.
Can they see outside through that screen in there?
It does kind of have that, I don't know, the mesh vinyl aspect to it. So you can kind of see through it if you get up really close to the glass.
Looks good.
Like it.
Maybe just mention one thing is that what we've run into here on the Riverwalk, I mean, the whole goal with the Riverwalk, I think from the council from a long time ago, is to have vibrancy on that side too. But the reality of the situation, it's a little easier with a restaurant to provide that, and even some of those aren't the greatest examples. But with the retail, really, most of the retail stores are just using this for back of the house operations like Cliff's talking about. We've had some places, I think Goods made it for a while, had a, cash register back there and everything, and they were able to watch, but basically you got a security issue there in terms of if you've got a front door and a back door that you both got to be watching in terms of staffing and everything. And so what we found with the retailers is they're just, this is kind of what they're ending up doing because they're not going to, utilize both entrances as a main entrance.
Have you guys thought about limiting it to like mountain scenes, or are we gonna have like big donuts on it and different colors, or like, I guess they can do whatever they want, right? Cause if it's linked to their trademark, then they can do whatever they want, or it counts as their sign. If that were the Patagonia mountain scene behind it, that would count as all sign, or?
So, I mean, it kind of gets into the next part of the work session. Currently, per the code, pictorial imagery is included in copy. So that is not something that we're technically allowed to review or really decline on. But currently, based on precedent, any pictorial imagery, so let me hop down to here, any pictorial imagery that did not include any message copy, we have just approved without any contemplation of the square footage allotment. So this was a complete freebie. I believe they did it without a permit. It's just here. Obviously, you can kind of piece together that is a pictorial image of Breckenridge ski area, but it does not include any message copy for Breck Sports. So to kind of get back into some of the things that we've discussed earlier, the message neutrality does kind of conflict with how we're currently looking at things. So based on precedent, we do not review this, and that's one reason that the Mountain Vibe was approved with just the 5 square feet of message copy. Their pictorial image was not counted, but after staff have kind of like reviewed the code as well as looked into the definitions, pictorial image is included in our own definitions. So staff has some concerns with that and how we're proceeding. But definitely looking at the definitions of sign and copy and maybe not including those pictorial things, but definitely relating back to the Supreme Court and their decision of what, I don't know, the copy, the sign itself includes is something that we really need to look into.
So Patagonia, each one of those full windows without the letter is a sign.
As the code stands right now, yes, sir.
So those wouldn't be allowed.
No, sir.
Based on the limitation for square footage.
Yes, yes.
Not a generic picture, it's a, it's their actual.
It's trademark.
Assume that your proposal, if you remove pictorial and graphic, was the other word?
Yes,
Then these, and so the second one from the left would not qualify as a sign. Is that the idea?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then it wouldn't be subject to the square footage or
Yes, ma'am.
anything like that. That's where you're going with this.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's definitely something staff supports being able to screen out these back of house areas. I mean, definitely to Mark's point, where we are going to be putting a lot of funds into the Riverwalk and kind of making that more of a pedestrian and very activated area. But the built environment is the built environment. A lot of these retail and restaurateurs are not going to be able to completely change their internal circulations. So they will have to have, a more mechanical operational access in hand with, a lot of the stuff that's being discussed right now at town council with the delivery of stuff. So we wouldn't have, massive trucks coming back here, but they're still going to need a service-like entrance to gather all their goods and store stock, etc.
I mean, the further that point too, like in this particular building, probably was originally designed to really be double frontage, but over time, as the tenants went in and finished it off, they needed some place for back stock. So they've gone in and done various tenant finishes that really have restricted the double frontage on there. Cause I think when John Gunson originally designed this building, it was intended to have, take advantage of the Riverwalk and be open, or the rear entrance to Clint's. And then over time, that's just kind of gotten more and more back of house items as the years have gone on.
Are you taking more questions?
Yeah.
So your first picture had a bunch of flyers in the window.
Yes.
Do those count as signs?
So I don't know where my mouse
Because
is.
we love flyers,
So it's
especially Rotary.
definitely something that would be accounted for and maybe something that needs to be further looked at staff. The window sign definition specifically calls out not paper. I don't know the intention of that inclusion in that point. But I've kind of just included this sign because it's a really good catch-all. When you see bulletins like that, you immediately think of window signage. So that might have been a incorrect example photo. But it is something that staff would account as window signage. But most people are, prioritizing their own business and not community events.
So all the realtors, their windows are filled up with flyers, so it's paper because it's in a brochure holder. But their logos are, sorry, something went down.
Yes, I do know what you're saying, Alan. So some of that is actually guided under a separate section of code. But then there's also, if it's kind of internal in that building, it's not something that we usually regulate. But definitely even some of the freestanding, dispensers that we see all around Main Street is something we're currently looking into. So I'm happy to take more questions on this, or we can kind of hop over to some of the last examples.
Can you talk about the Lululemon? Like, so it's got tall letter, like 3 tall letters and the rest is short. So do you do 2 rectangles? Like, how did you?
So I believe for this one, I did circles for each individual Omega sign. And then for Lululemon, once again, our code calls out plain geometric shapes. So I'd have to count this as one large recreational rectangular sign. Sorry, I'm super tired.
Around the whole thing, not just the
Yes,
three
ma'am.
L's as one bigger and then a
Yeah,
shorter
we would
rectangular.
for just the ease of my calculation, I did the full thing. So it does include a little bit more in between each window, but then each window we would probably count as a whole. And then the breaks, so the mullions and buttons and that we would remove from the overall allotment.
Cliff, can you explain to me how you would look at this building with that view from one plane?
Yeah. So it's super difficult. But let me just hop over to Google Maps, and that way we can get a live. So we'll just hop over to Lululemon. We can get all these other crazies out. So currently, don't look over there. So currently, this facade here has this sign as well as this sign over here. So standing here in the middle of the road, which I do not advise, you can see both of these. So from this one location, 20 square feet maximum. If we, hop down a little bit, looking from this elevation, I actually don't think there's any signs on this side. Yeah. So the only one that you could see right now is this one. But then if we hop further over here, I can see this one, as well as these two. So I don't know if that's factually under 20 square feet, but that is the concept of from any one location, all of the signage that you can see must be 20 square feet or less.
When calculating it, the signs at an angle, do you project it onto a plane that shrinks it, or?
No,
It's
we
just-
look at it as just a flat elevation of the signage as a whole. Could you view it? So if you can see it, you see all 5 square feet of it.
Okay.
And from this angle,
Mhm.
you'd have to count the wrap. If they wrap from the doors around the corner past the Omegas.
Hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
Window signs don't.
So when it comes to the maximum 20 square feet of signage viewable from any one area, it's undetermined currently because it is not addressed in the code. Oh, okay. So the window signs would be in addition to that 20 square feet. Sorry, let me re-answer. The 20 square feet would be for all permanently permitted signage on the building. Their window signage is an addition to their permanent signage.
And so what I'm saying is you could take your 4 signs and 5 feet and wrap them when you've got an angle of building like this.
I don't know if I'm following. It's definitely 5 square feet total for the entire business. We don't go by the frontage. It's just an addition of here is so there is a carve out, and I guess I can bump it back up to here so you get a fuller picture. Both Mountain Vibe and Patagonia, there's a section of the code where you can legally display what signage you have on the front of your building, on the back of the building, if you have 2 separate frontages. So in that term, for their permanent signage, Patagonia and Mountain Vibe were allowed to get these permanent signs on both the front and back without really contemplating the second sign. It's kind of what you can legally show on one frontage, you can legally show on the back frontage. The window signage is a completely separate in addition to, so you would not get 5 square feet front, 5 square feet back. It would be 5 square feet total. If that makes sense. I think I might have confused myself.
What about just like for the back of house here? What about a sign, and that probably what that little white one is on the right door, says please enter from the front. Would that count as their 5 square feet?
So staff has gone back and forth because of that not paper definition. Signs that we see more permanently in nature. So this one is their deliveries only, do not enter. We would count that as their 5 square feet. Other ones that are like sale signs and, you know, very temporary in nature, come and go, we've kind of just avoided. Definitely a few businesses will always have, you know, their cold drinks inside sign, their hours posted, maybe an open sign, and then a fourth one could be, you know, hiring or sale or etc.
I'm gathering from what you've told us that Patagonia did not run this by you guys.
No, sir.
What are we gonna do about that?
It's Vail Resorts, not Patagonia.
We are coming to a determination on how we want to move forward with this through this discussion. So definitely any comments, concerns, or questions that you have will ultimately help out in our enforcement.
Can you go over a little bit what staff is wanting, or I'd like to hear what staff's thoughts are and opinions.
On anything specifically?
Yeah, and maybe just like the Patagonia one's good, and maybe we can like look at it like the second one over from the left, assuming that's not trademarked, but it probably is. Assume that's just a scene. Would you guys like more of that on it without the wording, or what?
Staff would be supportive of this type, what Elaine has pointed out is the second from the left, this format, no message copy, strictly pictorial graphic imagery that may or may not be able to be tied back to the business, in the sense of Breck Sports. You know, you could in hand put this back to Breck Sports, but how many other, you know, mountain rentals are there, you know, trying to provide for our ski season? So it kind of mystical in the sense of kind of leaving out any advertising. At that point, it's just aesthetics for our town. For this particular sign, it doesn't really block a back of house. It doesn't really provide any major benefits. The only thing staff could really think about is the benefit of sun exposure in the winters and the mornings, since this is eastern facing. So that could be a benefit, but it's not necessarily working back of house like we see in these other two examples. So staff would like to see more second from the left, strictly graphic, no message copy to be able to provide a screening for back of house. It kind of hides those unsightly areas, as well as, you know, gives these restaurateurs or retail a little bit more privacy in these areas.
Cliff, I'm confused. What distinction are you making between that panel, second from the left, and the graphic you just showed us on Breck Sports, in terms of either the way it is, what it looks like, or how it is being used?
So currently it would be how it's being used. So this second from the left in Patagonia is being used to screen back of house storage operational aspects. In the form of Breck Sports, staff doesn't really see a benefit of having this full window screening. It may add some aesthetical purposes, but it's kind of do we want this type of covering for the window, even though you can see through it in some areas, and that may be a decision for you all. But deciding what is the potential uses that this could be. So to answer your question, for these two, it'd be the use. Breck Sports staff doesn't see the reason for the installation. For Patagonia and Mountain Vibe, staff sees the reasoning for these installations and the benefit because it is providing screening for unsightly areas.
Yeah, I think what we wouldn't want to see. I agree with Cliff's assessment there, but especially we want to make some distinction between that front of house and the back. I mean, we wouldn't want to see this blocking the view coming down Main Street. There's even historic standards, it talks about being able to see into the storefront windows and to, for the, pedestrians to get that experience of looking in to see the, goods that are offered within the establishment. And that's part of the whole character downtown. So on Main Street, we've got a 180-degree view on this in terms of we would not want to see these things at all allowed. But in this type of treatment here on the backside, we would support it.
But if you enhance Riverwalk to the point where it's a mini Main Street, for lack of better terms, why wouldn't you want to have the same enhancement there? And have the merchants move their screening into their space in such a way that it creates more of a storefront.
I agree. I mean, ultimately, that would be wonderful if we could achieve that. We just don't know realistically right now. That's the place that we're in with the Riverwalk.
I think over time, it's probably regressed. I mean, I think there's probably more pedestrian traffic than ever on the Riverwalk, but in terms of the businesses, I mean, if you probably went back 20 years ago, probably half of these businesses did have a secondary entrance. And now a lot of them, I think, looking at what the value is to their store, it's easier to, from a staffing standpoint, to just hire less people and get the majority of people through the front. It seems to be the way they're handling it operationally.
That's a business decision. It has really nothing to do with the town or the code.
Well, exactly. But I'm saying that we've been trying to incentivize the Riverwalk and get people to take advantage of it now for the better part of 30 years, or actually longer, probably 30, 35 years. And it is a business decision that it seems like a lot of businesses have decided it's not worth it to take advantage of that frontage.
Mark's got that's a good idea, Mark. I mean, Mountain Resorts would be smart. All they can do is like a window display that's recessed 2 feet or even 1 foot. They could put those exact signs a foot back inside. That would be legitimate, right? Because it's not on the window.
And
And
put
they
some
could put
merchandise
some
in there.
product display in front. It'd be like Saks Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And they could still say enter around front.
So staff did make that recommendation to Mountain Vibe, and Aga, the owner, was not privy to it. She did not want to lose the 2 feet
Yeah.
of that window just because the storage area is that vital.
But maybe over time, what those business marketing will overtake storage, or she can rent space upstairs or something, utilize all space. I don't know.
Yeah, when more people are walking by, right? But right now it's
Yep.
not high traffic.
All these businesses have opinions and they want to maximize what they perceive is in their best interest for their business. But the code doesn't need to necessarily listen to that or accommodate that. And Lululemon may very much have wanted to have that graphic signage on there, and they're upset about that in the same way that this merchant might be upset about giving up that 2 feet. And again, this is a business decision. And if the code says that this is what we want our town to look like, then they need to abide by the business decision, and the town shouldn't be accommodating what they like or what they don't like. Am I wrong?
Look, I mean, that's, we want you guys all to weigh in. You kind of expressing your opinion there, and I think everyone should. Because this is something that will ultimately take over to town council for their discussion. It's just a reality of what we're dealing with on a regular basis. And like Cliff said at the beginning of his presentation, we're getting regular requests about this.
Yeah.
And we want to take a reasonable approach to it. Like you said, yeah, ideally we'd have, window shopping right here on every one of these windows. But that is not the situation on the Riverwalk right now. And so, I think we're going to continue to have a lot of non-compliance and a lot of enforcement issues, which frankly, we don't have the time to staff all of them. And so is there something that we can come up with that we think is a, middle road solution? And so that's why we're suggesting that maybe this is, but we certainly want to hear from all of you.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Mark, and I appreciate the fact that you don't have staffing to enforce it, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have a regulation, even if you can't enforce it. Because if you have the regulation and you choose not to enforce it, that's kind of a policy, but you can always go back to a point of enforcement if things change later on. So I don't think that just not wanting to enforce it, not having staff to enforce it, means that we don't have a very specific regulation about what we want that space to look like, or any other space that somebody wants to construe that that's the back of the house kind of thing. As Chris mentioned, that's not the way this building was designed. I can remember very much when you would go in either entrance, and it wasn't that long ago. And these merchants have decided that that's how they want to run their business. That doesn't mean the town needs to accommodate that. And you can choose not to enforce it, and I respect that. But that doesn't mean that we should change the regulations to accommodate what the business owners want.
You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, I had two thoughts that I wanted to throw out there. One is, if they're not using the rear entrance as a public entrance and only for delivery, it doesn't seem to me that requiring them to use the back as a display area is that useful, because people can't, if they see something they like, they still have to go all the way around to Main Street to get into the store to, sample whatever they're interested in. But the other thing that occurs to me, and this is based on what Cliff was just saying about the distinction between Breck Sports and, say, the Patagonia look, is that deleting the words pictorial and graphic, I don't think addresses our problem then. Because if we only want it in the back, I think that we may need to come up with a new subsection here instead that explains that if the window wrap is in the back and it is solely graphic or pictorial and does not contain any wording or message, that's okay, and do it in the affirmative so that people know what they can do. And keeping the regulation as it is, as window sign, because otherwise Breck Sports will not be a window sign and people can do it in the front. And I'm not sure that, the goal is to encourage that. So I would advocate just having a separate provision saying that if it's in the back and if it's solely pictorial or graphic and contains no wording or other messaging, that would not be considered a sign or something like that, then it wouldn't be subject to the square footage and all of that.
Yeah, and from that standpoint, it probably makes sense to have that regulation within the development code, so it's clear
Yeah,
that it's considered development and is not a sign.
right. Yeah, I mean, I would still include it in 9-15. You know, and probably 9-15-15 and just make it a new paragraph saying, you know, notwithstanding, what is it, D and E, that, if it's in the back and, as I said, you know, was solely pictorial or graphic.
Just to extend that further, so so there's back of building and then there's back of house operations, which is dependent, you know, what if the tenant or the owner business owner decides to put their storage in the front for some reason, I don't know why, but.
And that somebody would want to
Yeah.
take valuable Main Street
No,
space and flip it.
Provide the example, Lululemon is, you know, South Park where everyone's walking and half of their storefront is mechanical, dressing rooms, storage, etc. So he is correct. They're not all buildings. Back of house is in the rear.
Okay. Well,
I do like that suggestion.
yeah. So, you know.
Yeah.
I think we can work on wording that might accommodate something like that, you know, either in back of house or solely for the purpose of shielding storage.
Yeah, just operational uses
Yeah.
of that
Yeah,
business.
yeah.
Son.
But then I had one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter. I was going to ask you, in the definition of sign, how is symbolic defined? Because symbolic could sort of run into pictorial or graphic, but if you go the way that I'm suggesting, maybe that doesn't matter.
That is true. I do not know if we have a further definition of symbolic within the code.
No, there is.
So it would just be a general meaning of that term, which
Yeah, but
relates back to pictorial and graphic, which is your concern.
right.
But I guess with your most recent recommendation, then, you know, the definition of that wouldn't matter.
Right.
But staff can look into that.
Cliff, can you clarify? I'm looking for any mention in the code about just frosted windows. I don't see
I
that.
don't believe it's contemplated or that I know of in
So-
code.
So these back of house Patagonia can frost their windows and be done with it according to our code.
That would be preferable. That would be way preferable.
So
I would also ask, I guess, just because you're a good expert, would this have conflicts with the building code of not being able to have viewing out of, you know, these more service areas, being able to see out of access
you can
doors?
put shades on a window.
Okay.
So it seems to me that's the answer. They can frost it. They can paint it. They can paint it. But you can't whitewash it like they used to. Remember those? Well, that
Of
would
the
be a
mountain
image.
scenes, and I
Yeah.
think I would like to see more like Breckenridge local scenes. I think that's a good use of it as opposed to just frosted. I think it's artsy. I don't want it to look like a bunch of billboards though.
It is, but I was just pointing out what's in the code. We're debating the
Yeah.
code and these pictorial images.
So
whether
Cliff,
that's-
I think in some of the west facing ones though, from working in the store previously, it had a large expanse of glass facing west in the afternoon, end up getting pretty extensive shades because, you know, it really turns into, you know, a greenhouse. So I think for some of them, it's probably like twofold. It's to kind of like block out the merchandise and then also like cut down on like the solar penetration where the frosted glass wouldn't necessarily help with that.
But they can also put up shades. There's no regulation on shades. They can put shades up and block out their laundry.
so just along those lines, and this, my consultant brain always looking for workarounds. Why could a Lululemon just put shades inside with their logo on it, some lights that could light it depending on time of day?
Because
It'd
then
be
it's a
1 inch inside, it could be, and it totally bypasses the window regulation. It doesn't take up any space inside the store. Or it could just be permanent cardboard or permanent plywood with that whole Lululemon thing there, and they can backlight it and for any of these merchants,
That's still a sign.
it's not on the window.
So if
It
it's,
doesn't have to be on the window to be a sign.
so if it's set in the glass,
Yeah, it's an interior sign. They can just get around the whole thing by doing that.
That's come up before.
Hold up, there's dark.
I know they could
Yeah.
dark light, they could backlight it. I'm sure a lighting expert can figure out how to make sure you see it. It could be neon.
I think that that's out of the scope of our discussion. If
I know,
that's
but I'm
allowed, we
saying-
I was
can,
thinking
You
the
know, let's talk
Yeah.
about what we can allow and what we can't.
Yeah.
Within the code.
Yeah.
Because the way I see it, this Patagonia's excessive, Lululemon's excessive. And that's really what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
Is the excessiveness of these things and do we want to allow them or not? And I think from what I'm hearing everybody say here, including staff, we don't like this. And we have good reason to not like it. And we have a code in place that says you can't have it.
And may I take that a step further? Windows are a really important part of the architecture and the design code, and we spent a lot of time looking at windows, their scale, their proportion, their fenestration, their mullions. And now we have kind of easy, cheap graphics, and we're losing our windows and we're gaining billboards. And I think that anything that we allow should be on the inside of the windows, like the mountain vibe, and should not be applied to the outside of the window if we want to maintain the architectural character.
I agree.
Yeah, I like that too.
I have one thing to throw into this mix. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but following up on Elaine's comment about the graphic scene of the mountains of Breckenridge. The first thing that popped into my mind about that is that a mural?
That's
Oh.
the word I used.
Yeah. And murals are prohibited in the conservation district.
Okay.
And
I
if- And if we talk about what we can't decide about signs, then are we gonna be able to regulate murals? If these aren't murals? I don't know. Like I said, I don't wanna go down a rabbit hole with that, but I pulled up the mural and it's on the facade of a building.
Mhm.
Whether it's on the inside or the outside of a window, there's nothing I could find that said differently.
Yeah, I don't think the intent was to apply it to windows, but
No, but
the way it's written, there is
Yes,
distinction's not.
still again, inside though, even if you had a mural inside your window, we couldn't regulate it under our development code.
well, like the one that Elaine liked, the Breckenridge Mountain, that's on the inside, isn't it?
I think that's probably vinyl on the outside, actually.
This one's on the inside like that. I like both of them.
Well, see, I don't think that one, I wouldn't call that one a mural. But I would call the Breckenridge Mountain, over all those several panes, all connected.
Yeah.
I would call that a mural.
But
And you
those are
lose your
connected.
window.
so-
You lose the architectural, it's a mass void thing where your windows are the openings into the buildings. And you lose that when they start applying these graphics top to bottom throughout a row of windows.
Whether you stick it on the inside of the glass or the outside of the glass, I don't think that's a difference.
I don't think it is either.
If it's on the window, it's on the window.
Yeah, I think I'm guessing that this one is hanging inside the window, but not applied directly to the window.
So for, I guess just to clarify, the sign code doesn't specify like inside of glass or outside of glass. It just specifies fixed to the glass.
Yeah. That's what I consider.
Matter if the vinyl is on the inside of the window or the outside of the window, it's on the window, it's window sign. If it is off of the window and inside of the building, staff does not contemplate it. We do not review it. We do not get into that. That's a whole legal battle. I don't think Kristen wants to get into.
Back.
Kirsten
You're
wants
good.
to get into. But I forgot where I was going with this.
Well, the question was whether
Oh,
the Mountain Vibe thing was
yes.
attached to the. grant.
Mountain Vibe, they reached out to staff and worked with staff to get this approved. That is their total 5 square feet of window signage. They are not allowed to have any more window signage on the front. Do they? Yes. It's to the point that they were actually trying to work with staff to decrease this as much as possible. It was a lot bigger. The Mountain Vibe was bigger than their permanent sign. So staff was able to work with them to reduce that to something that we were comfortable with. But once again, since this is window signage, this is not permitted. Staff just worked with them to have a code compliant, no permit required installation, if that makes sense.
So-
But to answer your question, no, it is affixed to the glass.
Okay.
But, I mean, that reads much more like a window
Yes.
and less like a
Yes,
billboard.
right. Whereas
I
the
would call that
Patagonia thing's
obscure.
right in your face.
Right. Right.
Do,
Obscures.
Just-
something.
1515E,
Just obscure.
does that wrap count as part of the sign square footage?
It does not. It is,
They could have just done Mountain Vibe as a wrap down below. on the
and it
exterior.
would have not counted at all.
Would have not counted. at all.
But based on the standards for windows wraps, you have to place it within 6 inches of the top of the window or the bottom of the window. And that's not always in the most perfect line of sight. So I believe that they chose to go this route, put it right in the middle, which you are correct. There are loopholes, if you want to say, to get around it, meeting all the specifications of both of these standards, and neither one would count towards your overall sign allotment. You are correct.
And that's really not a problem because those loopholes don't obscure the entire window.
No,
That's.
we intentionally wrote those. Yes, sir.
Yeah, to Mike's point though, where he's talking about the solid to void ratio, I mean, I think that we could even regulate, like if someone was trying to do it on the front facade, just using the handbook of design standards, because I mean, we do have a policy or design standard 95, I believe, is one that regulates solid to void. So we would definitely not want, the majority of the window obscured. Because it becomes a solid.
Yeah.
What about the doors? Like, to me, it seems weird that the doors you can't see in, and when you're walking in, it's all so closed off. Have you thought about like that they could make at least maybe just part of it so you can see in, or?
So
Again, I think
Kind
since
of-
it's on the rear, they don't want people to walk in there. They want to make it look like it's,
yeah,
because that's not the front, that's the rear, and they don't want to make it look inviting. They want to make it look like it's closed off and secured.
Yeah, it's along the Riverwalk next to Patagonia, actually.
Yeah.
So it would basically be the exact opposite of our historic standards. This is not a door you want people to be invited in. We don't want a relationship between the pedestrians on the street and the business activity. So it could be contemplated both ways of like, maybe you do want to have some little gap in case of making sure it's the right delivery person, picking up deliveries at night or something like that, having like basically an eye hole for security. But overall, for public facing, this would still be an operational area where we wouldn't want to like invite people in, similar to construction sites.
Interestingly enough, in our core commercial, our design standards for the rear of buildings conflict a little bit with the goal of the Riverwalk. Because if you read, they really want a pretty heavy solid to void ratio on the rear and make it look very utilitarian, even though we did obviously under the handbook permit buildings like this. But if you read that section, in the more recent ones we've had, like the building that's replacing RMU that went through, for instance, that has a very utilitarian kind of closed off look to the alley. That's obviously not on the Riverwalk, but the handbook doesn't differentiate between the Riverwalk or across the street. But from precedent, you can see that we have allowed more of a storefront on the rear to the Riverwalk. So I think that would be like if someone, that was their goal, we probably would allow it. But I mean, you're getting into different nuances in terms of, you know, when you're the true primary facade on Main Street versus the rear facade.
And when you start to talk about doors, you get into the whole very slippery slope of, is this a required egress door with the building code? So that in an emergency, people inside have the opportunity to get out. You'll see the sign on many doors that say during regular business hours, this door must be unlocked.
Which is the case in these.
Yeah.
Which is the case in these.
Hey Cliff, maybe you want to go through those last couple of examples also?
Yeah, I was
And
thinking that we
kinda
could get into
to
the
Kind
UPS.
of
store.
closure on the
Yeah.
commission.
So we'll go ahead and drop into the last few. These didn't necessarily fit into some of the stuff that we previously talked about. So this is one of the dispensaries on Airport Road. Is this the new one?
Yeah, it just recently changed owners and changed names.
Staff has been kind of working with them a little bit on their overall, you know, business licensing, setting up shop, signage, etc. So staff noticed this, which overall staff believes this is a great example. I am currently unsure if they meet that 5 square feet just because the center sign looks a little big. But overall, this is kind of what we're wanting to look at. You know, both Colorado state statute as well as local regulations do not allow the display of merchandise, marijuana, for these stores. So most of the time you see something like this. So these are, well, one other dispensary right next door, and then Summit Mountain Rentals. I believe that someone mentioned that this might be the laundry facility for their rentals. So we're working on it. But over here on the left is Green Dragon. If you see kind of what was mentioned earlier, they are utilizing kind of that 5 square feet with this Green Dragon logo, as well as some of the stuff on the door. But this upper information actually does meet the window wrap stuff. So we wouldn't necessarily have to contemplate that from their sign area. And then I don't know if those are. Oh, and then the last one, and just to show you how it's different than some of the other ones, this is very large full window coverings with lots of advertising and lots of pictorial, graphic, symbolic imagery. So staff wanted to kind of include this one. You know, this is in a different section of town than our commercial core here in the historic district, but the code is still the same regardless. So with this one specifically, staff does not support it. It has more than 4 signs. It is over 5 square feet. There's also no reason to block out these massive windows for the UPS store. Obviously that front entrance area is PO boxes. You know, they're not the prettiest, but it does give a little bit more safety aspect for people that are going in there, getting stuff from PO boxes. You kind of already mentioned the amount of pictorial imagery as well as the actual message copy on all of them is not something staff supports. In these two, staff is great with the 2 dispensaries. We're going to handle Summit Mountain Rentals just because they shouldn't really be using this, and it's definitely a lot larger than 5 square feet. And then Northern Standard is a great example. Staff currently believes, we are unsure if it is code compliant at this time.
So it seems to me that the UPS example is one that, you know, if they removed the wording and just had the pictures, that the way under your proposal, by removing pictorial and graphic, that would be okay. And I don't agree with that.
I think that would actually fall more into the symbolic. It's like symbolic of what their service they're offering
Oh,
versus like
well.
just having a generic scene or something is, I guess, how we were maybe like thinking about it.
Yeah, but
Because you typically wouldn't have like packaging materials and, mailboxes as like kind of your, yeah, or I mean, it's definitely branded versus something that's just generic and just kind of, if you have a mountain scene,
Yeah.
that could be anything. It could
So
be.
you're saying symbolic would make it still be a sign, whereas it would not be considered pictorial or graphic.
Yeah, I
I-
think by leaving in the symbolic, you can say it's symbolic of the business that's there. Where
Yeah,
if you just have a mountain scene, like it could be a short-term rental laundry, it could be a ski shop, it could be a restaurant. Having a
yeah,
pictorial of the 10-mile range really wouldn't be attached to any one of those. Where having packing materials in the mailbox seems to directly relate to UPS.
I see your point. I don't think that it necessarily obviates the suggestion that I was making, to have a separate paragraph that explained what would be permissible.
Yeah, it's really with the Supreme Court's decision, it's really difficult. In the past, we were certain types of signs, we'd give this amount and got really specific. And then now it's basically for the property, you have to say, this is the sign area. And then you really can't weigh into the copy
Yeah.
unless you're saying it doesn't qualify as a sign.
Right. Well, yeah, so they could do window wraps with just mailboxes, that kind of thing. And then they'd be okay without the whole window being blocked out.
Yes. Currently, staff really doesn't support any of the signage up here. But our recommendation would to be utilize the window wrap. It makes it a little bit more inviting for a commercial, shopping center where people are walking up and down of this. Window wraps and then other,
Right.
carve out of window signs would be more suitable for this location instead of whole window coverings, regardless of what it's depicting.
Right.
But yeah, then the other two were kind of the dispensary stuff. Overall, there is something to be said about kind of the historic district to Airport Road. And staff is kind of contemplating that right now, and maybe we'll be back in the future. But definitely, if you have any final comments or questions, I am happy to take them now.
Did we give you the input you were looking for? You have
Well, a lot of input.
Just hear from each of you briefly one more time, just kind of what your overall take is.
I'll start off then. It seems to me that the code that we have in place is adequate. That if they're trying to obscure operations in back of house, there are ways to do that and be in compliance with the current code. So to me, let's enforce the codes we have and leave it at that.
And I think that's a good suggestion. Otherwise, my suggestion is not to delete pictorial and graphic and instead have an additional subparagraph in 9-15-15 saying that if graphic or pictorial material is used to obscure, I don't want to call it operational because the whole thing is operational, but storage or other areas that they want to shield from the public,
Could you call it just?
that would not be a sign. What?
Could you call it just non-retail space?
Well, I mean, but not everything is retail.
It's non-customer facing.
Yeah, but right, without, so that it could be solely pictorial or graphic, but with no wording.
So, thank you.
Mike, do you have a
Oh,
comment?
I'm sorry. Think very much, I feel very strongly that windows need to remain windows. It does in this example, but in many of the examples where graphics are applied across the entire exterior of a window or a row of windows, that the windows become a billboard, and that's very detrimental to the integrity and character of the town's architecture. Exactly how this is done, I think there's various solutions. If the purpose is just screening, I think we should just frost the inside of the window. There are plenty of films that do that without imposing all of the graphics or creating a billboard at the exterior of the windows. Thank you.
You, Mike.
Steve, do you have a comment?
My, my opinion is that we're better off doing nothing right now until we really follow through with what it is that we want. And I just think that before we move, we have to consider the mural issue, which fits in with Mike's comment about obscuring entire windows and then becoming billboards or art or murals or something other than what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't think we're ready to rewrite anything until we drill down a little more into what it is that we will.
I agree that we should look into it more. I'm not really in favor of the external like mural things. Now, this one with the signage, that's fine because it's limited. I definitely like what you did with what was the one place that you guys worked with them? As far as it's way better than looking at all the trash bags and or
Mountain
bags.
Vibe.
Mountain Vibe. Yeah, so I think you guys have some good ideas going and let's keep working on it.
Alan?
Yeah, I agree with Ethan and Steve. I think we have a sufficient code right now. I came up with a workaround in a few minutes of, ways they can screen inside, and I'm sure the experts that come here with applicants can probably come out, help these people out as well. So I don't see any need to change what we have and again, if we come up, town council, or we determine we want to change things to make River Walk more enticing, then we can do that. I would think that pedestrian areas like downtown are different than the shopping center or Airport Road. And you might want to consider that down the road. I don't think there's a need to change it right now, but you may want to consider having different sign codes. Because one is people are walking by and the other one people are driving by. So you may need, there may be a different sign requirement for people that are driving by. And just as an aside, I just find it really interesting we have these transoms that would be could perfectly frame a fixed permanent sign, but for both Patagonia and Mountain Vibe, it just looks awkward having these signs that don't fit within the transom. Good point.
I agree.
Yeah. So that might be something to consider future for permanent signs.
I'd like to echo some of the comments that were made. I think that we do have adequate code. And I think that we're discussing this because staff is having problems interpreting the code with the examples that we have been given. So I think Mike has said it quite eloquently. We need to let windows be windows. I don't like the obstructions that are on these windows as full graphics, whether they're signs or not signs as a mural. I don't think it's appropriate for that to be filling the window space. And the window space is part of the architecture of the town, and we need to respect that.
Thanks.
Are we done with the work session?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Do we have,
Thank you, Cliff.
town council update?
It's a little old now, but December 12th, but since you guys last met, so, did get a visit from, Senators, Roberts and McCluskey. She a senator or she is in the,
It's a
she's a
representative.
rep.
Yeah,
like
she's the House
chair-
Speaker.
House Speaker. So, anyway, they came, they just wanted to say hello to the council, thank the council for all the support they'd given in the last year on a number of the bills, especially the housing bill as it came through. And did explain that housing is again gonna get a ton of exposure in these next several months as the legislation starts popping up. Some of it they're working on already. And, but it's likely to be done in a series of smaller bills. They realized that was probably part of the issue, trying to be all encapsulating in one bill. It just, there was enough in there for everyone to hate in last year, and that's why it got shot down. But they may be able to get to some things that there's some agreement on, by taking smaller bites at it. So anyway, that's what they're anticipating is a lot of activity on that in 2024, and most of that work happens in the next, I don't know.
So it sounds like they're acknowledging the fact that housing really is a local issue, but we need some major support from the state that would be more general.
Well, the state, no, I think that, you know, like, yes, there's acknowledgement that the state needs to provide support, but there's also acknowledgement from a number of the legislators, and I think the governor still, that there needs to be some top-down things done to deal with housing. They take the approach that if they can increase the inventory of housing overall in the state, it's going to be a good thing for workforce housing. It's not going to be for Breckenridge, because if we make more land available for housing, unless we have a deed restriction associated with that, which is never part of the proposals coming from the state, it's just going to be another market rate unit that's out there.
That's my point, that really, the housing really needs to be a local issue, and the state needs to be a non-specific blanket above that, rather than dictating these restrictions and requirements.
Yeah,
to
but
the locals.
but in response to your question, I would say that there's not that acknowledgement on a state level. They still think that these things need to be looked at, a blanket approach. There was in that last legislation, as you may remember, they were carving out the rural resort towns. And so there's still a hope that if something like this does come up, that they'll be able to make some exceptions for us. But it's still really early in the process right now. Expect to see a lively activity, and we'll probably be getting involved in, you know, taking a position on bills and stuff like that in the next few months, like we were last year. So now, of course, Eric Mamula took a strong leadership role in that whole process last year. Now he'll be wearing a different hat with county commissioners, but I imagine he'll still be involved. So yeah. Anyway, so let's see, also, on the planning commission discussion on vestibules, that we had back in December, that will go to the council next week for discussion. Heard real briefly at the meeting that they would like to look at them to some extent. So they're probably not taking quite as a restrictive view of the vestibules as the commission is, just to give you guys a heads up. But we'll see next week. We're going to talk a bit more details, talk about your guys' recommendations, etc. So anyway, more to come on that. And then the main thing, and Chris, you might want to give me a little help with this, is on BGV. Let's see. We focused on parcel 2, correct? North Gold Rush?
Yeah, we did. I can jump in here. I mean, I think that, I guess what had transpired from the previous meeting that we gave the update on is at that previous meeting, there was the suggestion that the majority of the workforce housing be relocated to the Entrada site, which is at the corner of County Road 450 in Highway 9. And so based on that recommendation, the applicant came back and suggested moving all but about, I think there was,
That
Eight-
recommendation came
eight-
from town council.
yeah,
8 6-bedroom units.
yeah, 8 6-bedroom units would still remain on the North Gold Rush lot. But in doing so, because there's such a low parking demand by that number of units, that would make it so they did not have to build a parking structure to meet their parking agreement. So you just have that approximately 3-story building have to the back of the lot, kind of built into the hillside, and then essentially have a surface lot almost as it is now on that site in North Gold Rush. And then on the Entrada site, they were using the previous plans that you'd looked at for annexation to build something similar to that. I think everyone acknowledged that was probably a little over-programmed between the lack of landscaping, hard surfaces, and just the general size of the building. But using that as kind of a point of reference of what would be in the scale, since they didn't have time to come back and design a new building. So kind of going forward with that, that concept essentially got the head nod from the council. And so now we're in a period where, kind of all the deal points have kind of been discussed at the work sessions, but now we're working with the applicant to kind of get a detailed list to bring to a work session, to have it kind of go by line to make sure everyone is on board with each deal point, both the town and the applicant, before we would go to a first reading of a development permit or development agreement in early February.
Have they done a traffic study for that corner?
They've, I think Entrada, they did a traffic study last summer.
Yeah. For Entrada?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the primary entrance to Entrada would be on the northern end of the lot on Highway 9, kind of right in front of the bus stop. That would be the primary entrance.
Yeah, we actually, because of those issues, partly, that was gonna be it was gonna be right in, right out at the north end of Highway 9. And there wouldn't actually be access into the site off the CR 450 there on, here in Bryling Road there. There's just an access to his, storage that he already has, but to not access from there because we just knew that what kind of chaos that was gonna create.
Right.
And then already the queuing situation there is so bad. So, yeah. So that's all potentially back on the table now with Entrada. We'll see, but,
And so, yeah, that adds a little bit of complexity just because now we have, it complicates it because that parcel is not currently in the town. So we have to go back to an annexation agreement in addition to development agreement and all the legal ramifications that come along with the annexation. So we're really, we're pushing the boundaries of complexity on development agreements with this one.
So Chris, how much would the new Entrada housing look like the project we reviewed a few years ago?
I mean, I think it just in terms of the character and general site layout, I think it would be substantially similar. I think in general I think what we would desire is something that's scaled down, because that was really, if you look at the number of units and how it impacted really the site with the limited open space, the limited site buffering, the amount of impervious surfaces, that was all driven by the number of units and the size of that building.
You
So I
talked
think
about The plan that Hogan did, that we looked at, what you said years ago was.
Yeah, I can't remember who
It
designed
was
it.
months ago, not years. ago.
Mark Hogan designed it
Okay.
previously.
But they were also looking for a height waiver because they wanted to go down, like consider the first level was gonna be.
Yeah, and we,
below grade.
and because of the timing of it, those items, any kind of waivers or what's appropriate for the building and everything is to be discussed during the annexation agreement and not during the development agreement.
And the annexation agreement will come before the development. No,
Comes after the development agreement. Yeah, the development agreement is kind of talking about everything else and basically saying it. We're contemplating an annexation and workforce housing here, but that's still
Be a general.
just to be able to kind of get to the finish line on the development agreement. And just with how long it takes for an annexation, that would really hold it up. And we want to obviously understand what the proposal is and have a fit test and those type of things. So that the council ultimately will have that input from the planning commission, you know, in terms of kind of a review and not having any drawings other than the previous ones. We just can't really start on that just yet.
Okay.
And part of it is just the timing of the council. We'll have an election for a new council in April. So they've been working on this for such a long time. I think they want to finish the development agreement while they're seated versus having that overlap into the next one. Where then those people have to be brought up to speed and it creates another like a level of complexity. So we're trying to get through the development agreement phase and then start working on the annexation agreement, you know, really in short order.
Chris, what's the town's concept for what they would like to see the parking lot become? Because one of the things that bothers me the most about this proposal is that we had a development plan, a master plan for that parking lot, which had mixed use, et cetera. And now that's kind of been pushed aside. So I'm seeing a dirt parking lot staying there. I'm seeing the developer stripping all the development rights off of that, which decreases the value of that so that he can do what he wants to do up the hill. And what's the town's vision for the parking lot other than a dirt parking?
Well,
lot?
I think the current town council's vision was pretty clearly identified during this process and they'd like to see nothing on it. You know, I'm sure there, if you talk to different members in the community, they would have different opinions of what should or shouldn't go there, but
So my
from-
perception is right. They want nothing on it.
from the town council standpoint, very early on, that's to them, that's considered one of the best benefits is not having a larger scale development in the center of town. And they've been pretty clear on really not wanting, you know, larger buildings in that area and all that comes along with it. So, I mean, I think that's the town council's position is the official position of the town.
You're talking about the North Gondola lot? Or the north lot, the north?
I'm talking about the lot that's right next to the gondola.
North Gondola, it's paved. That's why I was confused. He kept on saying dirt. I'm like, wait a minute, it's paved. So, okay. All right, thank you.
Paved dirt, it's a vacant lot.
It's a parking lot.
And once we strip all the development lot
Mhm.
units off, it's gonna stay a
That's right. It's gonna say a
vacant
parking
lot.
lot. Yep.
I thought Eric said there was some wisdom in saving that for future development opportunities for the town.
Well, you know, that's always, I mean, Chris is right. I mean, that's a goal of the council is to just see it like it is. And I don't believe Eric was there, but,
Just a while ago.
yeah, but that's always a possibility down the road.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, there's an opportunity there. Maybe they decide at some point, we need housing bad enough that we'll structure, we'll build up a platform above the parking or however they do it. And do some deal with Vail to make that happen. So nothing's permanent, but as far as this council is concerned,
But you would need to replenish all the development rights
Yes.
that have been stripped off of that.
Correct.
piece
You
of
need to,
property.
yeah,
for
you
the
need to move
benefit of
density
BGB.
back over there and you didn't need to go through a, obviously, planning process and all that.
Yeah, it'd make it not that this has not been a complicated process, but would add a whole another layer by not having any density and talking about developing that in the future.
Right.
Which is what they're doing to the lot up on Timber Trail. That has no density, no transferring, so you're right, it can always happen, it can do it. Process, yeah.
Okay, the only other thing I thought you might be interested in, I know some of you, particularly Alan, would be interested in this if you hadn't heard already, but the Lizzie Load on Little Mountain, that's the, you remember above the ice arena, the hill there, and where we had those development proposals previously it was in the county, it's unincorporated property, about I think 18 acres in size. Anyway, the town just went under contract to acquire the property.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's being acquired for open space purposes. The barricades that are blocking the trail right now will be coming down if they haven't already. And now pretty much controls the entire hillside there in its open space portfolio. So
They're
that's,
gonna put employee housing at the top.
yeah, no, yeah. No, we're not gonna do. No, this is a perfect open space
Yeah.
parcel with lots of trails going through it, so, yeah.
What about saving places in February? and
Yeah.
April?
Have we sent information already to you on that? Yes. Yeah. Yes, the plan is, a number of us are going. We encourage every one of you to, if you can, make it. I think most of you know how valuable it can be. So, yeah, you can go ahead and do those reservations yourself if you want. Jesse can help you with them. And I think, what is it, planning commissioner rate for them, or is it just the CLG rate?
LG is the best rate.
Yeah,
And Jesse prefers if you would do it yourself, and then just send her bill. And then
What is our education requirement to maintain our historical?
go to as many trainings as you can.
Isn't there a requirement that?
I think it's only like,
Every 2 years?
I think it's just one commissioner per year, isn't it, Julia?
I don't know that it's set like that.
Okay.
Actually, I thought I had read that when I was signing up or something recently on the CLG. I mean, I think we've always done very well, having multiple commissioners and, I mean,
January
we
30th.
definitely encourage anyone.
First to the second.
Like a week early this year, which is actually good.
Gotta try to run first, so they can go first day or the third day. I'll have to come back. You go to Aspen. Go back to.
Good fly. Book your and have Jesse reimburse you.
That's all we had. Mark, unless you guys had anything else.
Close it down.
7:03, we adjourn the meeting of January the 2nd, 2024.
Before everybody runs off, I have something I'd like to say, just so you don't hear it somewhere else. I am running for